It's that first domino that if you can tip that domino over, it'll tip over the rest of the dominoes and make your life a lot easier. The focusing question is actually, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
Hello, and welcome to the Hire Yourself podcast. We publish episodes twice a week about franchising and business. Each Monday, we'll release a 30-minute episode where we dive deep into a topic. Thursdays are our shorter, lighter episodes where we will discuss things like business resources or topics of personal growth. I am one of your hosts, Pete Gilfillan, and I'm joined with my business partner, Nat Truitt. And together we have every experience in business and franchise ownership. We have worked hard over the years to realize our dreams and control our own destinies. Our experience will help you become a better business owner and franchisee so that you can live life on your own terms. All right, Nat, I thought today what we'd do during our podcast is each of us would kind of talk a little bit about one of the books that has had a major impact on our lives. And I'll start to make it easy for you. One of my favorite all-time books is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And we've mentioned that book before, but it is such an important book in my life. And I've shared probably 500 copies with other people that I got to talk about it again. So a little bit of this we've talked about before, but it's really important. Darren Hardy is a national bestseller, international bestseller of the book Compound Effect. And Darren is known all over the world as kind of a business guru. He was the editor of Success Magazine for about 10 years. And the Compound Effect I got about 10 years ago. And I read it and it just rocked my world. And that's how I got connected to Darren Hardy and started really following him. And he became my mentor. And I have given over 500 copies out to people. And it's amazing. I get handwritten notes back to people on how it's changed their lives. You've read the book, haven't you?
Yeah, and it was super impactful for me too. I totally agree. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think the points in the book are pretty simple, right? It's all about this idea that you make small little changes and they have a huge impact over time, right? And I think that's the key, is making those small choices. He uses the magic penny story in his book, and it talks about how one person gets the option to get $10 million and person B gets basically a penny. And that money for the penny compounds every day for 30 days. And the story, I won't give it away, but basically the person that picked the penny compounding daily actually ends up with more money than the person that with $3 million, which is kind of cool from that standpoint. So it is all about kind of small choices, whether you decide to walk extra 1,000 steps a day to eating 150 less calories. I thought that was pretty interesting and certainly has a big impact. It's kind of that whole small smart choices plus consistency plus time equal a radical difference.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Like, I think a lot of times we want to do something heroic and make, massive change. But a lot of times then we kind of burn out after a week or two. I know I'm guilty of that, like, going to the gym and I think I'm still a senior in high school and I get out all the weights and 2 days later, I can't even roll over in bed because I'm so sore. And then I don't go back to the gym for a very long time. So I think like with the compound effect is kind of that, like, hey, let's make some smaller changes, maybe go walk around the track a few times and kind of work your way up. And, then in like 90 days or 6 months or 12 months, it's like, then you're kind of back at a higher level. And you didn't blow yourself completely out of the water.
Yeah, and Darren has Darren Daily. If people aren't listening to it, they need to. He basically sends out a short, like 5-minute message every day. You can subscribe; it's free. And he just launched a new series, Nat, that basically he wants people to do the Darren Daily each day for 90 days. And he's going to have a contest. The people that do it every day, he's going to reward them with a live broadcast where they can ask questions and stuff like that. But the key to that contest is he's telling people, listen, you have to be consistent. Just every day you have to be doing the same things, just those little things that make a big difference. And that's really, kind of that compound effect. And he uses the example of the 3 individuals, the 3 buddies in a book, right? And Individual A, he basically makes small changes for the good, right? He decides to read 10 pages a book a night and maybe go walk a little bit more and take a little less food in, 150 calories. And individual B basically decides, hey, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to kind of status quo, just kind of live life. And individual 3 basically makes small bad changes, right? Gets a bar in his house, starts having one more drink, it makes a few more calories a day, watches a little more TV. And bottom line is the impact after 3 years is amazing, right? I think he uses the example of 60 pounds difference between person A that made the small changes, lost 30 pounds, and the person that made this bad small changes ended up gaining 30 pounds in a swing, both in their weight and their careers and their relationship with their spouses. It's pretty amazing, the small little things, how much they add up.
Anything you kind of do it. 27 months, which I think is probably about right. You're kind of going along. It might even be like about 2 years, but then all of a sudden, you start to see the departure, whether you're kind of staying the same or getting better or going down. I think that's actually very true even in business. You might be every day, putting in the work, and it's I always say it takes a little, twice as long as you think it's going to take. And that compound effect diagram actually was kind of interesting because it probably is, a lot of times 18 months, 24 months, 36 months, but then all of a sudden you kind of break through and you just transform. It's like, that caterpillar becoming a butterfly or whatever.
Yeah, and you could apply that to prospecting,
Yes.
to the point you were making earlier with your business and stuff like that. And I think another great point in his book is about this idea of 100% responsibility for your results, right? You're responsible for whatever you do. And I think he used the example of a couple. They're in there and they're asking who's responsible for the happiness of the couple. And basically Darren says, the real answer is you're 100% responsible for a relationship. It's not 50-50 to be successful. It's 100% ownership in it, is just the way it works. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That was actually, when I read that was kind of a new thought for me because I'm always been kind of a pretty fair guy. So I'm like, of course it's, 50-50, right? And once you start thinking I'm 100% responsible, it actually changes your life. I actually implemented that years ago, and I try to teach my kids that too, that you need to come to the table and be 100% responsible, whether it's for your relationships or what have you. And I do think that's a great little nugget that we should all, learn from.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, as a society, if we could be more about 100% accountability or responsibility, I think we'd be in a much better place as a society. The willpower is another one that he talks about, right? It's all about this idea of having willpower versus kind of a strong why. And, I've read a lot of books on the why and how important it is to have a why, but he uses the example of this, if somebody laid a 20-meter plank on the ground and said, listen, I'll give you $1,000, walk across it. That's a no brainer, right? You take the $1,000, you walk across it. But then he says, let's change it up. How about if we put that 20-meter plank between two skyscrapers and I'm going to pay you $1,000 to cross it? And everybody goes, no way am I going to do that. And then he uses the examples. Hey, listen, if your why is, if you have that 20-meter plank across the two things and the building is burning across the street or across on the other side and your loved one is there, you don't need $1,000 across that. You're going to cross that to save your loved one. I thought that was pretty cool example. Yeah, I mean, the why is what it's all about.
Yeah. That is, it's amazing. I love reading books. I've been reading The One Thing recently, which has been really impactful for me. I sometimes feel like I'm hardwired as an entrepreneur, so I'm kind of have that entrepreneur's ADHD where, I'm kind of like focused on this, and then this shiny object catches my eye, and then I'm over here focusing on that. And the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, actually talks about like kind of focusing on one thing. It's kind of funny because I was reading some reviews on the book, and there's like all these 5-star reviews, and then there's a whole bunch of like 1-star reviews, and it's like, why did it take 200 pages to when the title is like the whole thing, the one thing? But I think it's probably the guys that give it the 5-star review are the guys that kind of struggle with it, because it's a nice book, and it kind of helps you. And it's very similar to the compound effect, actually. The if you can visualize, remember like when we were kids or we'd play with dominoes and you set up the dominoes, mathematically, a domino can knock over a domino 1.5 times taller than itself. So with the one thing, you kind of think about like this line of dominoes, and what's the one thing is that it's that first domino that if you can tip that domino over, it'll tip over the rest of the dominoes and make your life a lot easier. The focusing question is actually, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And that's like the one domino for today is, to try to figure out like, what's the one thing I can do today? I think what's interesting about that too is kind of that concept of don't start your day before you finish it, which actually what that means is you sit down, get some headspace for yourself, and figure out like what you want to accomplish today, or what do I want to accomplish this week? What do I want to accomplish this month, before you even, turn on your computer and look at your email and get distracted firefighting all day long. So I really like that concept of the one thing. It's actually been super helpful for me because, like I said, I kind of, as an entrepreneur, get that shiny object syndrome. And it's interesting. I have to look up the domino analogy. You're smiling, Pete. What do you want to say?
Well, I just want to say, it's like squirrel.
Yes.
Oh, over there.
Totally.
So, but it's one of the things that I think is so important, and I've practiced it for years, is really planning your day before your day starts and putting down. I do 3 things. Hey, here are the 3 things that I want to focus on. And it's probably from my training through Living Your Best Life Ever with Darren Hardy, right? Or Insane Productivity, one of his other programs, right? And this idea of focusing on the 3 things that you got to do and doing time blocks, really focus time, energy on those 3 things and letting everything else go. And you've probably read some other great books on priorities, right? And it's kind of the same thing. It's take the top 3 things and then just let everything else go. And, you get too wrapped up into lists of long things. Just focus on the 3 things that are going to drive the most results for your family or your marriage or your business or whatever you're trying to do, your goal.
Yeah, I just Googled the domino effect for the one thing. I'll show you a couple graphics but here's that number 1 domino and then the geometric progression. So at domino number 18, you could knock over the Tower of Pisa. Domino number 3, you could knock over the Eiffel Tower. Domino number, I can't totally tell if that's 50, 51 or 31, but it's bigger than Mount Everest. And number 57 would actually reach to the moon. So you kind of have this, I know this kind of sounds crazy, it's literally just starting with those, that small domino, and then that keeps on knocking over the bigger dominoes. So I think that's kind of a good visualization, and very similar to the compound effect too, actually.
Yeah, right. And you start with that little objective or the little goal, and then you knock that down, and then you have a bigger goal. And to your point, it becomes bigger.
Yeah, it's empowering too to be able to kind of check something off your list. This is one thing that I did today, and check that off your list. It's empowering versus always having like, I have to, solve this huge problem today. If you just chunk it out, I think then you might be a lot more successful.
And I think the domino effect is tied to momentum. And that's one of the things that Darren talks about in the compound effect is this idea of the big mo.
Yeah.
When you have momentum, you have that going. And he uses the example of a rocket ship, right? It uses a good portion of its fuel to get through the atmosphere. And then once it gets there, it doesn't need much fuel when it gets in outer space. And I think that's so true, is it takes so much. And I used to handle all the incentives, the variable marketing for Ford. And ran about a $5 billion budget. And what we learned with incentives is you could spend $1,000 and it'd be working. And then if you stopped and you took it back to $500, what happened? You would have a dramatic decline in terms of business. And then it would actually cost you more than $1,000 to regain that momentum.
Yeah.
It would take more money and more time to get it back. And so I'd always say, let's just be consistent, but somebody come up with the idea, hey, let's save some money, let's cut the incentives down, and we'd lose that momentum. And it just, once you lose it, it's so hard to get back.
I love some of those stories you have from Ford. I know we could get into that on another day, but you have, about the antenna on the car and, building it into the glass, and then, oh no, let's save a couple dollars. And it was so many good stories from Ford.
Yeah, it was a good learning environment. So, but bottom line is that books play such an important role in our life, and there's so many things that we can take away from them, whether it's the compound effect or the one thing. And we'll probably talk about a few more books down the line, but today we've got two good books for people. I suggest they read the compound effect and the one thing.
These days, do you find yourself like sitting down and taking time to read a book, or are you doing more audio books or Audible?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Audible. I like the idea, especially when I'm in the car. I look at that as great quality time. Yeah. So anytime I read a book now, I sit in a chair, I sit in bed and read, and I find myself falling asleep after about 10 pages. The audio portion is nice. I can be doing that when I'm doing other things too. So I'm a huge fan of Audible. It's just a great way to consume books.
I know sometimes when I'm driving, actually I'll turn on Audible in the car, even if my kids are in the car. And it's interesting because it seems like they kind of pick up on it. You can tell their ears kind of perk up and they're kind of interested. So I think that's kind of an interesting, just that windshield time that you have with your kids, and kind of connect them to things that you're interested in. And, it's very interesting.
Well, my kids, they claim they hate it, right? And when we go on these road trips and I'll play them and they're like, oh, Dad, we don't want that. I don't want that. Yeah. And it's funny, they'll be in protest, but they will pick up stuff and it'll come out later. They'll say, we heard that. And so I think that's right. It's anytime you can expose them to a book, and it's a way in which, it's pretty easy and it's kind of casual, because I've tried to pay my kids to read books.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll say, even with the compound effect, I pay my kids $20. I'll say, you read this book, I'll give you $20 or $50 or whatever the number is, because I think it's so important. Yeah. And they think I'm a little crazy, but I think it's important that they learn from these books and try to become better.
Do they need to turn in a book report to get the 20?
Well, they have to write a little summary and kind of explain the book to me. Of course they do. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. That's good. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hire Yourself podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a rating, and leave a comment on iTunes or wherever you're listening to our podcast. Hire Yourself offers some great resources on our website at hireyourself.com. And if you would like more content regularly, follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook. We look forward to you listening again to help you on your journey of living life on your own terms.